Okay, I think we could start. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the final event in the series of events that we've been convening alongside the Monsoonal Multiplicities exhibition. Thank you all for staying with us throughout this period. Today we were premiering a short film by filmmaker Haidar Dewachi of the work of the three wonderful artists, Feedback Theatre, Sheila Ghelani and Naiza, who took up residency in Monsoonal Multiplicities for 10 days. Using the exhibition as a reference, they were asked to apply their artistic research practices to the question, how is London a monsoonal city? Their work was shown at Open House Workshop 2 weeks ago. But today we're going to show a film that begins to explore the artist's work processes in responding to this question. I'm going to hand over to Georgia to play the film, and then after that we've asked each artist to reflect on the residency. They will speak after the film has been shown. Thank you.
The aim of this residency for us was twofold. One was to get us back in the room together. We haven't made work together for a little while.
And is an opportunity as well to work on someone else's material. So usually we generate all the research before we start creating something.
So there was a time where we would look at the website by ourselves, then we discussed the website. Very quickly we realized we had these different ways of entering the website through the body, the mind and the blood.
My approach in responding to the Monsoonal Multiplicities exhibition was both familiar and unfamiliar, in that I did some things that I usually do. I went to books and did some research and talked to people and carried a lot of the ideas around from the exhibition in my head.
Over the last 10 days, I've been thinking about air, monsoonal air, London air, and the air where I am in the middle of England, drawing it in big, deep breaths.
This project was very much about unpacking this archive of weather history and really thinking about it as a South Asian woman, as a person who wants to perhaps take ownership of that history, and also find how do these archives, how do we make them live? How do we reimagine them? How do they translate for us as social documents of history?
One thing that definitely we have found through this residency is to work with this idea of mapping. That's something that we've been developing with the help of John Cook, which is one of the researchers that has been doing all the mapping for the website.
We also have a lot of words in different kinds. We have like a collection of weather words. We've found some bits and pieces of Shakespeare that talks about the weather. We have names of wind in different languages.
The third framework was heritage, so the idea of blood and how we were connecting to the material through that. And obviously it wasn't obvious for myself or for Nina, but was very obvious for Mita.
There's a line in the website that says the trade winds blow from east to west. I was obviously reminded of the East India Company and how the East India Company blew the trade from the spices and the silks and the gunpowder And then it blew my ancestors as well. My great grandparents came here and they returned. My great grandparents came here and they returned, but my father came here and he stayed and he settled.
But it's really still. It's not
The idea of scale is very evident in Monsoonal Multiplicities because you understand the life cycle of a dragonfly in relationship to how long it takes that dragonfly to fly from South Asia. It takes 4 generations. Then I started also very intuitively wanting to make the map of London. And so these watercolors, these water maps began. I'm excited about the water maps because of the way that I filmed making them. So it's not about a finished product, but it's about a process of thinking how the medium of water floods a page and slowly over time, dries into this kind of shell or this map.
I couldn't actually visit London, which would be a normal part of my research process. So what I did was I went to books and I looked for London in books. I looked for London in my past work and I gathered those things around me and I worked on the floor and I arranged those objects and that material in a variety of ways. I often talk about what I do as the choreography of objects, and I think that's what I was doing. I went on the East India Company walk as part of one of the events, and that had quite a profound effect, I think. I was just playing with objects in relation to landscape before that. And then when I went on that walk, we were shown a very particular painting that was done on the ceiling in the East India Company offices. So I turned the landscape round because of that shape, so it became more of an elliptical, and so the landscape was tipped on its side.
An important thing that I learned from Monsoonal Multiplicities platform is the fact that we can learn from the global south. So the solutions, the processes, the sustainable ways of living that people adapt and adopt in their lives is something that I think continues. There's a kind of tradition of living with climate, with weather conditions, and using those conditions to kind of move through your space. So I think that is something very precious that this platform gives us.
Nor rain, wind, thunder, fire are my daughters. I tax not you, you elements, with unkindness. I never gave you kingdom, called you children. You owe me no subscription.
Okay, I'm going to hand over to the artists now to reflect on their residency, and we're going to move from Feedback Theatre, who's going to be represented by Feldman, to Sheila Ghelani, to Naiza Khan. So Nina, would you like to take the floor?
Thank you. I think firstly, all of us would just like to say thank you for this opportunity. It's been really incredible to be with such a rich jumping off point on which to do our work. And it's been incredible. I think coming into it, we all expected us to be pushed in a new direction in terms of content. As a theatre company, we hadn't considered the monsoon very much at all. And I think what we found is that actually we've been pushed the most in terms of form. The content has been one thing, but we have been asked to think and play and test and experiment in realms that we haven't really been in before. One, of course, was the kind of online and the digital. And we've found really interesting ways of working together despite not being able to see each other very well. And then we've also encountered, I think primarily the mapping and how we can map and how our bodies can create maps and how maps can kind of influence and be meted out on our body. And that is an area of work that I think is we're just kind of cracking the surface. And we really are very excited about going further into that. And I think that just the other thing about layers, and honoring layers in our form. And I think when we make performance, we always work with episodes and fragments, but there's something about the process of this residency that, at least for me personally, has really given that legitimacy. Seeing all this incredible academic, rigorous work on a website that is layered together has kind of shown me that that really is a valid way of representing something with multiple perspectives and multiple experiences. So yeah, it just feels very much like a beginning, and that we were pushed to places we never could have expected. And in terms of the question, is London a monsoonal city? We're going to keep asking that, because we definitely can't answer it.
Thank you, Nina. Sheila, great.
Brilliant. Yeah, I'm probably going to say and echo a lot of the same things. But I just wanted to say really clearly that I feel really grateful to have been invited to undertake the residency. One of the things that I really value is being part of the interdisciplinary constellation of everyone that you've gathered around the research project. That feels really valuable. And also I've really valued working alongside the other artists, even though we didn't spend pretty much any time together. There's something really interesting about the outcomes that I think's been really useful and that I'll carry forward. And hopefully we'll get to meet each other in the future. And I also really valued spending time with the website itself, the aesthetics of it, the construction, as well as the content. I've got a body of work called Rambles with Nature, and I felt like I could go on a ramble within the website itself. And you could come across something and let it take you somewhere else, whether that be a phrase or a video or a set of images or a map. And lastly, the events themselves that have been programmed alongside the exhibition. Each one of those has had a real impact on me too. I've taken a phrase pretty much from each of those events, and I'll be carrying those for us in residence, which is obviously this set of images. It feels like really just the very beginning of something. It's almost like the first faltering steps, like a thought in a notebook or just a mark in a notebook. That's how far I feel like I've got. And I'm not actually sure whether the images themselves will tip into something concrete. I mean, obviously they exist as they are, but whether I'll sort of carry on working with them. But I'll definitely be taking forward the ideas that are embedded within the work. I want to think a bit more about the materials that I work with and also the form again. One thing that I'll definitely take forward though from asking the question, in what ways is London a monsoonal city, is an interest in the financial instruments of the city in relation to nature and the elements. And I want to dig around and think about that a bit more and how that translates into policy. And then also how to translate that obviously into practice and art. And there's something creaturely as well that I'll be playing with and thinking about some more. And yeah, I think that's probably all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Sheila. Fantastic. It's just lovely to hear your thoughts. And I'll hand over to Naiza at this point.
Thank you. Thank you, Lindsay. Being the third person, I think everyone has really said a lot of the thoughts that I've had. I think in our first meeting, Sheila had mentioned the slowness of creative production. And I would like to come back to that for a moment, because although this has been a really short span of time, I think it's been amazing to see how Feedback Theatre, Sheila, myself, we've all managed to kind of get a foot into the door and really claim something which is the beginning of for all of us, something specific and tangible. I think going back into this idea of interdisciplinary research, that's something that I feel has been very valuable through this process. And I think it's come across in so many levels. The project and the stakeholders of the project in South Asia, and the last week's event was really useful to see how everybody's gained something. And the same thing came out with one of the speakers in our ecology group, that you can't do it alone. You can't understand the problems on your own. You have to kind of collaborate with people in different cities, different countries. And so I think that in that sense, this project has, obviously given multiple methods of research for all of us to examine, but it's also brought us into it's opened up a kind of critical dialogue between different cities, amongst ourselves as artists, and also communities across the, this notion of the monsoon and of weather. I'd also, I was looking at the website again this weekend, and one of the things that I suppose I didn't mention in the film was, the emphasis on ethics, which came out in a number of the quotations and the references of scholars like Astrid Lehmannis, and also the scholar Malhotra, I think it was. And she says something which I just want to quote briefly. Weathering enables us to talk about the ethics of exposure, necessarily in relation to the political economies of place. And this really came out for me as well in the platform. And I think it's something that you sort of encounter, and you kind of encounter through the kind of material experience of people living in the cities, and through the videos that we see in the multiple layers of the project. In terms of my work, I think it's been really important, as Nina mentioned, the form of something. And I've worked with watercolor a lot, but these water maps have been a sort of significant breakthrough in my own practice. So I'm really looking forward to exploring fluid bodies, fluid relationships, and this idea of thinking about this liquid space of the map, and how I can sort of work with it in more critical ways. I think the second thing which was a really tangible outcome in terms of my own research was thinking about how London, how this question of London being a monsoonal city, how it's entangled with the engineering of weather in South Asia. And so Sunil Amrit also mentions how, the uncertainty of the monsoon becomes a kind of calculable risk. And that's something I'd like to really explore as I move forward, thinking about the legacy of engineering infrastructures like canals and dams. Lastly, just like to say thank you so much for inviting me to this project. It's been such a privilege to see and experience the work evolving with Sheila and Feedback Theatre. So really, really been amazing to be close, and yet sort of through Zoom meetings and through this virtual space, it's been a completely new experience.
Thank you so much, Naiza. Well, if I on behalf of Monsoon Assemblages, what an extraordinary experience it's been to have you working with us on this project. And you've really kind of managed to materialize the project in ways that were unimaginable to us, and have really kind of added to an enriched process in an amazing way. So thank you for your time and energy. It's been really valuable. to the project. Just by way of the future, between what we're going to do with this work now is that between the 17th of April and the 8th of May, each of the artists' turn will upload 7 Instagram posts of their residency work onto the Monsoon Assemblage's Instagram feed. And for those who are here, our handle is monas_2016. Each of these feeds will end with a 5-minute film of their work made by Haidar. So do look out for that. We're announcing that closer to the time. So we really look forward to wrapping up this stage of the project with these kind of summative Instagram posts from each of our amazing artists. I'm not going to shift the focus. Oh, and I also just wanted to say thank you to Haidar, who's in the background of all of this, for the amazing work he did in making a film under lockdown of work that he could not visit other than Naiza's studio. And I think he put together an incredible film, not only an incredible film anyway, but under the circumstances, even more wonderful. So thank you. I'm now going to shift the focus of today's events to the Monsoon Assemblages project itself. And I've asked Dr. Beth Cullen and Professor Harry Charrington, who's head of the School of Architecture at the University of Westminster, to reflect on the project. I'll also do a brief reflection on the project. And time permitting, we will have a short question and answer session at the end if anybody has any questions or comments that they would like to make. So I'll begin. When I was awarded the Monsoon Assemblages grant by the European Research Council 5 long years ago, my understanding of the monsoon was quite frankly very limited. I knew that it was a planetary-wide meteorological system enveloping the lives of more than 1/3 of the world's population. And I knew that monsoon-related anxieties, pleasures, and intimacies defined the experience of everyday life in the regions it inhabits. I also knew that rapid urbanization, industrialization, and neoliberal development in South and Southeast Asian cities treated monsoon as an outsider, making disaster an inevitable consequence of development. I was interested in what might happen if, instead of treating the monsoon as an outsider, one treated it as an insider, foregrounding its agency as a maker of space, time, knowing, and being, and as an organizing principle of urban life. Proposed using the tools of the spatial design disciplines and of the environmental humanities, framed by political ecology and assemblage theory, to explore this proposition, have no idea really where it might lead. So the project began without any clear roadmap as to how to proceed. It took shape urgently through the people it assembled, the skills they brought to it, what we read, who we spoke to, the cities we visited, and through the agency of the monsoon itself. Last week, we acknowledged the enormous contribution our collaborators in each city made to the process. Today, I would like to acknowledge the enormous contribution of the researchers who were part of this process. First, Dr. Beth Cullen joined me in the first year of the project and brought her incredible sensibilities and sensitivities as an anthropologist and an ethnographer to it. Beth turns the project around the idea of weather as opposed to climate, shifting the focus of our research from an abstraction material embodiments and everyday experiences of monsoonal change. And her work on the non-human ethnographies of the monsoon has been key to its findings. A year later, we were joined by landscape architect and urbanist Christina Geros, who challenged the idea of this as a bounded terrain that had till then framed our thinking. She made the city yet another abstract construct that was both too large and too small to be useful in understanding monsoonal weather worlds. Christina began to look for ways to think about and draw cities into the monsoon as a complementary move to drawing the monsoon into cities. The third member of the core team was John Cook, who brought his incredible computational skills to the project and took us back to science, developing a language for drawing the monsoon using climatic data. Conversations about groundwater in Chennai and air in Delhi with our doctoral researchers, Anthony Powers and Harshavard and Bat, played a part in materializing our understandings of the monsoon. And the almost 60 Master of Architecture students who were part of the project for 3 years tested ways of thinking with the monsoon through mapping, simulation, and design. In other words, monsoon assemblages has literally been an emergent assemblage, a multiplicity of raucous ways of thinking and working, diffracted through the monsoon that has left none of them or us intact, and provided us with a hesitant, intersectional, interactive model for research in these uncertain, post-disciplinary, post-colonial times. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Beth, who's going to say a few words. Thanks, Beth.
Thank you, Lindsay. I'm just going to try and share my screen with you all. So as Lindsay mentioned, I've been lucky enough to work on the Monsoon Assemblages project as a research fellow for 5 years since its inception in 2016. And I've been invited to just give a personal reflection on the project. And I've got 5 minutes, so this is going to be brief, but I wanted to just acknowledge the journey that we've been on, how London has become a monsoonal city for me through the course of the project, and the effect that this work has had on me both personally and professionally. So over 5 years, we've been working in 3 monsoonal cities, starting in Chennai, then Dhaka, and finally Yangon. And it's been an absolute privilege to engage with these places, particularly now that travel is so limited, and to have formed connections with some inspirational people along the way. During the course of the project, we were lucky enough to meet and engage with organisations and people who are working incredibly hard to change the cities and places in which they live, through environmental activism, participatory practice and action research, as well as academic initiatives. We're still in contact with many of these people and organisations, and they continue to provide inspiration to us all. Although monsoon assemblages involved working in countries and contexts that were initially largely unfamiliar to me, I was drawn to the project because of the environmental and climate change concerns which are so critical for our current times. While the focus of the research has been on monsoonal weather systems in South Asian cities, processes of rapid urban growth and climate change are planetary processes that have relevance beyond the immediate geographical focus of the project. And so with this in mind, we didn't approach the 3 cities as detached observers, but as entangled participants. Our research efforts were not attempts to capture or represent monsoonal contexts, but were engaged practices of sensing, making, working with and responding to vibrant monsoon assemblages that emerged in each place. the methods and ways of working that have emerged are just a starting point for creative transdisciplinary engagement with complex, more than human systems that operate across bodies, borders, materials, and scales. And throughout the project, I've been really conscious that the monsoon is not weather that I personally dwell within. Nevertheless, monsoonal matters that emerged during fieldwork didn't go away once I returned to London. I began to notice frozen hilsa fish for sale in my local fish shop, caught from the Bay of Bengal and flown in via Heathrow. Pongal harvest celebrations among Harrow's Tamil community set against the grey January skies of London, a tangible reminder of monsoon seasons and festivities happening elsewhere in the world. Made in Bangladesh labels on clothing, evoking memories of the effluent-filled blue-black waters of the Buriganga River that we'd seen and smelt in Dhaka. And on my way to work and back, the red bricks of London buildings echoing colonial edifices that haunt each of the three cities. These monsoonal connections and associations help me to better understand certain social, political, and economic histories which are often hidden but are deeply entangled in my everyday life. And for me, this project has also been an experimental exercise in how to attune to earth systems and non-human entities. Learning to consider weather patterns and other than human beings as vital actors in our complex world is an urgent necessity in light of increasingly uncertain meteorological futures. Working on a European Research Council funded project gave us the freedom and flexibility to pursue unorthodox methods and approaches as we played and experimented with the tools of ethnography, history, architecture, and design. These creative, embodied, and engaged processes of attunement will extend beyond monsoonal contexts and this particular project. And this has not really just been an academic exercise. Following multi-sited connections and material processes has shown me that what we do on a day-to-day basis matters. From the food that we eat, the rituals that we practice, the clothing that we wear, to the bricks that provide us with shelter. Just as the weather is involved in the production of the social, so are we involved in the production of the weather. And with this in mind, it's essential that we consider how we nudge, guide, steer, play, and work with the more than human earth systems that we're entwined within. I can't speak for the other members of the MONAS team, but I know that each of us have gone on our own monsoonal journeys, and that these experiences will continue to inform how we think and act in the world far beyond the lifespan of the project. And I'd like to thank Christina, John, Anthony, and Harsh for their companionship on this journey. And lastly, a huge thanks to Lindsay Bremner, who's made monsoon assemblages happen, and whose extremely hard work, dedication, and perseverance has kept the project on course, despite the extremely challenging circumstances of the past year. Thank you so much to you all.
Thank you, Beth. Wonderful, wonderful words. Thanks. And now, last but by no means least, I'd like to hand over to Harry Charrington, the head of the School of Architecture and Cities, has so graciously housed the project and generously housed this project for the last 5 years. Thanks, Harry.
Thank you, Lindsay. I don't know that we've been generous. I think we've been lucky. It's been an enormous privilege for the School of Architecture and Cities to host monsoon assemblages. And it's been a remarkable 5 years, and it's a bit of a kind of shock to think it might end, because I think the feeling of what monsoon assemblages is addressing specifically, but also the things that it's brought up more generally, resonate through the school more and more. So it may be that this phase is coming to an end after 5 years. I feel we're embedding this project more and more into the work we're doing. I'm going to begin though, because I think Lindsay began by thanking her team and Beth has carried on and I'm going to carry on in turn, but I'm going to focus on Lindsay actually on this one, if that's okay. Because I think what you've done is remarkable. And you've brought together an extraordinary team, Beth, Christina, John, to mention just a few, and really choreographed an extraordinary set of undertakings. And having thanked you, I really want to concentrate the thanks on behalf of the school and what you've brought to the school. So if this Zoom call can indulge me for a moment to speak a bit about what I think this whole 5 years of endeavour mean to our school as just a small part of the impact of monsoon assemblages. I'd like to do that. I think the very first thing is to say it's brought an extraordinary ambition. I'm the guy who writes his signature on endless bits of paper. It gets worse every day. But I've done this for various things that when a budgetary request comes in for monsoon assemblages, just through that act of doing something as banal as that, as signing something off and approving something, I've become very aware of just how ambitious this project is and just how many people the researchers and the team are reaching out to and bringing together. And then we've had in our pre-COVID days, the symposia on campus. And again, the real opportunity to bump into people, meet people, listen to people from all over the world in those events. And it's really been part of the community of the school. And from that, we've gone on to further speakers, films, we've had artists in residences, the research outputs of everyone there. And I suppose above all, perhaps, for us, it's the impact it's had in our teaching. And for that, I should really point to something I think is remarkably pioneering about this project, which was that Lindsay used her master's studio, one of whom was John Cook, who now has moved on into the team itself. She used her studio for 3 years as a test bed for the work of monsoon assemblages. And that was an extraordinary thing to do. I mean, high risk and at one level, but it really brought other things to both the way we might think about running a studio at Westminster, but I think it also brought something to the project. I think to monsoon assemblages, it brought the power of suggestion and the capacity for a research project to respond to the testing of very specific, very imaginative scenarios and scenario testing rather than relying on models. And that jump into the detail, into the specific, into the imaginative, into the speculative, I think is massively important to the way we extend our research. Too often it does end with modeling. And this, I think, allowed it to become something much, much more. But the other thing is it built an enormous number of researchers. I mean, I know the people involved in putting this call together. I know the people involved with monsoon assemblages. It's brought a massive impact and sent people out all over the world now with knowledge, with queries, with ways of thinking about design more strategically. So that suggestion, that capacity that the studio has brought to the project, but the project has brought to our studios, is something I'd really like to emphasize. I think another thing that I'd like to emphasize, and I'm doing this at a moment where who knows what we're emerging into. I'm actually in at work and it feels wonderfully strange. I'll point you out the window. There's Madame Tussauds and the planetarium outside my window. I'm back. I'm sort of in the Marie Celeste. There's almost no one else here. But we're beginning to think about what our future might be in this post-pandemic world. Or maybe it won't be post. Maybe it will be something that is much more in a continuation, but living with it. And that quality is which I think Lindsay's brought through monsoon assemblages, is the quality of ambiguity. We've talked a lot about fluidity. there is this ambiguity that runs through all of the work, and I think it's hugely important for a school of architecture and design and planning that that's where we position our work, and that we enjoy the slippage, the entanglements of a very, very ambiguous reality. The person I probably was thinking about when Lindsay asked me to try and sum up the contribution the project's made to the school today, I thought of the Estonian-German philosopher Jakob von Uexküll and what he called an Umwelt, a surrounding world, a constituting reality, something in which everything is part and parcel of something else. And the way that Monsoon Assemblages has approached these interdisciplinary worlds, but using a cross-disciplinary practice, again has sort of made an ambiguity a wonderfully rich world of methods as well as subject matter. I think it's been extraordinary. And the final thing I should say, and we began with the film and the three artists today, is I think that's hugely important about this project is that it's brought a visual experience to the center of this kind of research, so that the atmospheric forces of the constituting realities that Lindsay and her team has been researching is present, not just the facts, but the atmosphere, the dynamic of the entanglements, the energy systems, the infrastructures, the life worlds, the matters, the technologies, whatever it might be. So thank you. Thank you for making such an amazing project, Lindsay. Thank you, all of your team. Let's make it go on in some way. It's been a remarkable assemblage. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Harry. I'm offline a little bit in the middle there, so I'm going to have to follow that in the recording. But thank you so much for those kind words and for the positivity with which you see the future of this project. It's really exciting. Thanks. We have a few minutes if anybody in the audience would like to raise any questions or make any comments. I wonder if you would like to raise your hand or, let us know. Is there anybody on the Monsoon Assemblages team who has got anything that they would like to, add?
I'm subscribed to the Mayor of London's updates, and since we were talking about it being a monsoonal city, forgive me, Sadiq Khan sent me a little celebration for Holi, which is today. I don't know if I said that right, but there you are, a monsoonal city celebrating Holi. And the mayor
There we go, yeah. Yes, Corinna's got a hand up.
So, yeah, hi everybody. Yeah, it was amazing to see the film, so thank you. I just wanted to ask, I think for Monsoon Assemblages, the artist's work has really brought a new audience to the research. And I just wonder, flipping that the other way, do the artists think that their work will be open to new audiences as a result of the research and bringing that into your work and your practice? Maybe, Naiza, do you want to respond?
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I would say that it would bring new audiences to our work because just out of default from the encounter that we've had with so many people, and I think just sharing the same platform and responding to the platform, and I think it sort of creates entry points, for ourselves and for the project.
Thanks, Naiza. Anyone else want to add to that? Nia? Jenny, I see your hand. I'll come to you now. Thank you. Nina, do you want?
I think there's something really interesting to think about going further about, I feel like we almost branded Monas artists, and like, what does that mean? And I think we've all experienced this kind of delight and curiosity and maybe discomfort at being in a group of artists. We had no direct control or influence over each other, and yet somehow we were controlled and influenced by each other. And I think there's actually a lot more to build on in terms of sharing, both in terms of the work, but also in terms of the network. Yeah, and there's something about being under the Monas umbrella that instantly, I wouldn't have spoken to any of you otherwise.
Yeah. Hi.
Me?
Yeah. Oh, hi. I've been unmuted. One of the things that I was interested in as an artist and academic is the first time that I was really influenced by the monsoon was in a sequence in Satyajit Ray's film Pathapanchali, when the monsoon signifies both a sort of a rebirth and a death. And I wanted, and I'm interested also in like the embodied and emotional sense of monsoons, how people experience it, because I think it's really important, weather and mapping, but whether there is an element, and that maybe has to come through artists, that we're actually looking at what that sort of, the embodied, the personal embodiment and the personal emotional responses to monsoonal landscapes, to the monsoon. Okay, I shall stop there.
Thank you, Jenny. Are you directing that question at anyone?
It was a general reflection. I mean, I particularly like Naiza's work because it did have that sort of that sense of embodiment and that sense of working with water, so that it became that sort of, the material also had a sort of an affective resonance. Because I think that that there is a lot of work there about affect as well as about effect, and so it was a sort of question of whatever, or non-question, I don't know, a reflection. Keep quiet.
I would just like to say there was a strong sense in all of our work, as I think Beth articulated so beautifully. For us, the monsoon was an embodied experience. It wasn't an abstraction. For the people we worked with, it was both life and death, as Harshvardhan often says. I mean, the monsoon is giver of life and death, and it's intimately inwoven through people's bodies, rituals, practices, and just everyday life. It was so interesting. John Cook told me that someone in his breakout group last week said that he came from Chennai. He measures the monsoon in sludge. That's his measure of the monsoon. It's kind of sludge he removes from the drainage each year. So I think throughout our work, that kind of idea of material embodiment was a very powerful way of accessing and knowing the monsoon. Are there any other hands up at the stage? We have a comment by Nina in the chat. Do you want to remark, Nina?
I just think that the question of like whose body is embodied is really significant. And for me, what the research did is it allows a dragonfly's body as well as the body of water to be considered equally. And if we're talking about human bodies, we thought a lot about this in our work. We only have access to one body and it's ours. And how can we use that as a tool? But having that thought in the context of all these other different kinds of bodies was very, very powerful.
Kester, I see you have your hand up. Great, want to come in here.
Hi, I just wanted to congratulate you. I think the exhibition is utterly fantastic. And it's such an ambitious thing to do, to make all this stuff visible in an incredibly complex volume of knowledge. And it really changes the way you see and imagine things. I just think that's a spectacular achievement in itself. And I just wanted to say that. It's very, it sort of shows you how much you read from images, as well as and how the kind of conjunction of image and text can kind of make you imagine in a very particular way, which is, you know, it's obviously a kind of familiar thing in architecture, but not so much in more conventional research forms, maybe. And I just think it's a really successful thing. So I just wanted to say that as a separate point, really. Thank you.
Thank you, Kester. Fantastic. I see a comment from Anu Mata in the chat box. Anu, are you still there? Would you like to make your comment, please? Be lovely to hear from you.
Hi, Lindsay. I don't know if, can you see me?
Yes, thank you.
Hi. No, I mean, it's just been such a delight to see this project. And, you know, as you know, that we have been also talking and thinking so much about the monsoons over the year, but to see the form you and your team have given it has been just absolutely refreshing and invigorating for us. So it's been wonderful. And I've been pointing a lot of, you know, my former students and colleagues to your site. So I guess it will stay on after this event, and it's going to be a great resource for everyone. But thank you so much. It's just been wonderful to see the work and the videos and the drawings up there.
Thank you so much, Anu. I think we probably will have to close now because it's 13:58 and people have to get back to Studio Crits and so on. So thank you, everybody. I have a couple of announcements that I want to make. First of all, that this isn't the end. We have this Instagram feed starting on 17th of April. Secondly, that Monsoon Assemblages also has a show on at Venice this year, where we're featuring the Dragon Eye and a kind of creating monsoonal storms. So we're creating a very embodied experience of the monsoon at Venice. So if any of you can get to Venice this year, it would be lovely for you to see it. Our book launch will be later in the year. So Monsoon Assemblages is not finished just yet. And then finally, I would just like to thank those who've made this series of events possible. Firstly, to Corinna Dean, who helped me to plan these events. Secondly, to Jonathan Kane and Andrea Hayes, once again, for the fabulous website they designed for us, which has proved the key reference point for all of these events. And finally, to the Architects Climate Action Network, whose technical team has supported us for all of these events. And without them, this would quite frankly have been a disaster. So thank you to ACAN for providing the technical support for us. And with that, I think we are saying goodbye till next time. So thank you all for being here. And we'll see you either at Venice or at our book launch later in the year. Thank you.